What if Padmé killed Obi Wan on Mustafar? What would happen then? We pick up with Obi Wan in Padmé's apartment after Order 66, looking for Anakin. Let's begin. The Coruscant air was thick with smoke from distant fires. In her apartment high above the chaos, Padmé stood at the window, watching the remnants of what had once been the Republic. The security alarm's sudden blare made her turn. Someone had landed on her veranda. Through the gossamer curtains, she saw a hooded figure emerge from a yellow galactic speeder. C-3PO's initial alarm turned quickly to recognition as he welcomed Master Kenobi. The security curtain dissolved, and as Obi-Wan lowered his hood, Padmé descended the stairs. She kept her distance, studying the man who had failed Anakin so completely, who had demanded perfect control while giving a child impossible power. Her diplomatic training helped her maintain a convincing facade of relief. Obi-Wan, thank goodness you're alive. The words felt like ash in her mouth. The news he brought was grim, but not surprising to her in any way. The Republic, the Jedi Order, all of it gone. Obi-Wan spoke of ancient plots, of the Sith returning to power. When Padmé mentioned the Senate's survival, he dismissed any hope of salvation through political means. Then came the questions about Anakin. Obi-Wan demanded details, asking when she'd last seen him. Yesterday, she told him, and that she didn't know where he was now. Her voice remained steady, even as her mind raced. Obi-Wan claimed Anakin was in danger from himself. Each revelation cut deeper than the last. Anakin had turned to the dark side. There was a security hologram, dead younglings in the temple. She protested, played the part of the shocked wife. But when Obi-Wan spoke of dead younglings, her mind flickered to that day on Tatooine 3 years ago. Not the first time, she thought coldly. Obi-Wan continued his revelations. Palpatine was the Sith Lord they'd been hunting, the architect of everything. After Dooku's death, he'd taken Anakin as his new apprentice. When Obi-Wan spoke of finding Anakin, Padmé saw through to his true intent. She asked if he meant to kill him, though she already knew the answer. He confirmed it with talk of threats that needed to be eliminated. I won't help you hunt him, she said, letting herself sink into a chair. I can't. Obi-Wan started to walk away, then stopped at the doorway. Anakin is the father, isn't he? A smug smile threatened to break through her mask of distress. So what? She thought. His quiet, I'm so sorry, as he turned away felt like poison. As his footsteps faded and his speeder disappeared into the Coruscant traffic, Padmé's mind was already analyzing the encounter. After all these years dealing with Jedi, she recognized their tactics. Obi-Wan hadn't really come for answers. He'd come to use her as bait, expecting her to lead him straight to Anakin. For a moment, she considered alerting security, but dismissed the thought immediately. Against a Jedi of his caliber, it would be useless. No, it was better to know where your enemy was and what they planned. As Obi-Wan's speeder vanished into the Coruscant traffic, Padmé reached for her comlink. She contacted Captain Typho, telling him to retrieve something specific from her security detail's armory and have it ready with her ship at the landing pad. The urgency in her voice made it clear this wasn't a request to be questioned. When she arrived minutes later, Typho stood beside her ready ship, a small case in his hands. As he started to step forward, she raised her hand to stop him. She told him to stay behind, her tone brooking no argument. Taking the case herself, she walked up the ship's ramp with C-3PO following dutifully behind. She settled into the cockpit, making a show of running pre-flight checks while leaving the boarding ramp down. Time stretched as she waited, giving whoever she was certain was waiting in the shadows plenty of opportunity to slip aboard. Finally, she reached across the control panel and pressed the ramp controls. As it sealed shut, she lifted the ship off toward Mustafar. The landing pad on Mustafar jutted out over rivers of lava, steam rising in the hellish air. As they touched down, Padmé felt a cold certainty settle over her. She didn't need the Force to be almost sure Obi-Wan was hidden somewhere in the ship's shadows. Years of political maneuvering had taught her to predict her opponent's moves better than any mystical power could. She saw Anakin running toward them across the pad. Moving swiftly, she left the case in the cockpit, then steered C-3PO forward by his shoulders, guiding him quickly but steadily toward the exit ramp. Every second counted. She needed to be clear of the ship before Obi-Wan emerged from wherever he was hiding. Senator Amidala, C-3PO protested as she directed him down the ramp, his stiff legs clicking against the metal. I am fully capable of walking on my own. I wouldn't exactly call what you do walking, she muttered, keeping up their forward momentum. Tell me, was your data set on walking filled with people attempting to move with soiled pants, 3PO? She asked.
Well, I never.
The droid's indignant response was cut short as she maneuvered him that final distance, getting him clear of the ship. She'd brought him along in case she needed his help with her plan, but this had gone much better than she had expected so far. Anakin approached, confusion evident on his face at the odd scene. Before he could speak, she rushed forward and embraced him. "Anakin, keep walking back," she whispered against his chest, using the momentum of their embrace to guide him backward, away from the ship. To anyone watching, it would have looked like an overeager reunion, a missed hug carrying them a few extra steps. Still holding him close, she reached for her data watch. Her fingers found the sequence of buttons by memory alone. Anakin started to say something, but his words were drowned out by the sound of crushing metal as the ship imploded, collapsing in on itself with devastating force. A final gift for her old friend, the negotiator. Suddenly, Anakin broke away from their embrace. He stumbled toward the twisted wreckage of the ship, his face contorted in shock. He had sensed it, Obi Wan's death. The familiar presence in the Force, constant since his childhood, had vanished.
What?
His hands clutched at his head, fingers digging into his hair. Padmé approached slowly. "Obi Wan came looking for you. I made sure he followed me here. I had an implosion weapon on board." Her words were precise, measured. "I killed him before he could kill you." "I could have talked to him," Anakin's voice cracked. Until now, he had been detached about Obi Wan's eventual death, assumed it would happen somewhere distant, somehow less real. But here, feeling his master's life and mere meters away, every shared memory came crashing back. The training sessions, the countless missions, Obi Wan waiting for him when he landed his starfighter on Naboo all those years ago, the gentle consolation after Qui-Gon's death, all those moments during the Clone Wars when they'd risked everything for each other. "Anakin," Padmé's voice cut through his spiral. She was giving him space to process the shock of losing someone he'd hoped would be a father, even if Obi Wan had only ever sought a brother in him. "Anakin," she stepped closer. There was no other way. "I could have talked to him," he repeated, softer now. "And tell him what?" Padmé's voice hardened. "That you followed proper Jedi etiquette when you killed a temple full of younglings? Or that you fulfilled the Chosen One prophecy and brought balance by killing all the Jedi? You and Palpatine make 2 Sith. Hopefully 2 Jedi survived somewhere. There's your balance, Anakin." Anakin stood speechless, but Padmé pressed on. "He would have killed you, Anakin. He used me to get to you. He believed you had gone crazy, and believing that, he decided to manipulate me into helping him, putting me, you, our children, in danger. He was willing to do all that to kill you. See reason. There was no other way. He would have always hunted you, hunted us, had he lived." "I could have arrested him," Anakin protested weakly. "Maybe prison." "You might be stronger than him," Padmé cut in. "But Obi-Wan, he knew exactly how to manipulate your emotions. Emotions you have never been able to control. I wasn't about to risk destroying our family, losing you." Padmé's hands found his face, turning it away from the wreckage. Her touch was gentle but insistent. "Anakin, the Jedi are gone. The Republic is gone. All we have now is us." She gestured between them. "We'll talk about this later. Now we need to leave here." Anakin remained silent, his jaw working beneath her fingers. In the thick silence that followed, both their eyes landed on C-3PO. The protocol droid stood awkwardly in the sulphurous light, his golden plating reflecting the angry red glow of Mustafar's rivers. He shifted his weight from one leg to another, servos whirring nervously, their proper, protocol-obsessed droid who had just witnessed conversations about youngling slaughter and assassination plots. They soon found one of the Separatist ships docked at the facility. The sleek craft carried them up through Mustafar's atmosphere, leaving behind the hellscape below. Padmé watched through the viewport as streams of lava grew smaller, the massive mining complex reducing to a mere speck on the volcanic surface. In a separate compartment behind them, they could hear the muffled sounds of R2-D2 and C-3PO's distinct voices, their faithful droids no doubt trying to process the day's events in their own way. It wasn't until they'd jumped to hyperspace and Anakin had vacated the pilot's seat that they spoke again. He wouldn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the swirling blue of hyperspace beyond the viewport. "So what are we going to do now?" she asked. Anakin kept his face turned to the viewport. When he finally spoke, his voice was too controlled, too measured. A poor mask for the anger she could see tensing his shoulders. "I'm more powerful than any Jedi. With the power of the dark side, I can overthrow the Emperor." His voice rose as he paced the cockpit, gesturing at the swirling blue of hyperspace, building himself into a frenzy. He went on about unlimited power, about destiny, about reshaping the galaxy, until finally the fire seemed to drain from him and he collapsed into the seat across from her. Padmé waited for the silence to settle, then turned to him with the same measured patience she'd used to dismantle countless unrealistic proposals in the Senate. "And how exactly do you plan to do this?" Anakin finally turned to face her. "I'll walk in and destroy him." Right. So you overthrow him right out the window. Then what?" Her voice was deceptively calm. His associates are always with him. Masa Meta and Sly Moore will be there. They'll see everything. I'll kill them too, Anakin said, looking away as her point began to sink in. Perfect. So you've just assassinated the Emperor of the Galaxy and his inner circle. That's treason, by the way. What next? Anakin looked at her, anger flashing in his eyes. She met his rage with her own. The Grand Army of the Republic, the Grand Army of the Empire now? That's quite an army you'll have coming for you after you kill their Emperor. And Anakin, her tone sharpened with mockery, I know they're about the same age as your preferred opponents, but do tell me how you plan to kill them all. Anakin sprang up, face contorted. I am the chosen one. I have powers beyond... Let's say you somehow manage all that. Padmé cut through his tirade. This empire is held together by Palpatine's political machinery, his networks, his influence, none of which you have. She leaned forward. The moment Palpatine dies, control of the clone forces falls to the Security Council. How do you plan to convince them to bow to you? And the Senate only stays quiet because they fear Palpatine. That fear dies with him. And what about the trillions across the galaxy who Palpatine has spent decades manipulating? She rose to face him. How in the criff are you going to handle any of that? Please enlighten me, because I must be too simple-minded to grasp this master plan of yours. Anakin growled and stalked to the viewport, his reflection a dark shadow against the swirling blue of hyperspace. He had no answers to her questions. Anakin, Padmé followed, her hand gripping his bicep. Anakin, you're a very, very impulsive being. You act on your emotions without thinking, and they blind you. When he started to protest, she stepped closer, her voice rising slightly, a clear signal to let her finish. It's not entirely a bad trait. We wouldn't be together without it. She left unspoken that while it might have been good for them, the galaxy might disagree. It's part of who you are, and I wouldn't change that about you. But you need to realize who you are. Political strategy is not your forte. She softened her voice. But it is mine, and I'm begging you, please listen to me. For yourself, for me, and for our children's sake. Anakin turned to face her, his expression asking the question he couldn't voice. What do I do then? Wait, Padmé said. For now, just wait, Anakin. Stay by his side. Do what he says. Learn to utilize his political power. Make yourself one who speaks with his voice. Make them fear you as they fear him. Her words grew more intense with each point. You are more famous than him, Anakin. You can go beyond him in that arena. Just be patient. Then, once you are seen with as much devotion as he is, then you can destroy him. Take your place as Emperor. That's how you beat him. Not by walking in and cutting him down in an instant, but slowly, methodically. Don't let him know he's dying as you kill him slowly. Her eyes gleamed. You can have the Jedi back too if you want. Once you are Emperor, call off the attack on the Jedi. Present yourself as their savior. Become the chosen one they called you. I doubt they'll all be killed. You can be both Emperor and leader of a new Jedi Order. But only with my help are you getting there, Anakin. His silence was answer enough as he sank back into his seat. After a long moment, memory seemed to strike him. You need to watch yourself too, he said, launching into familiar territory about his vision, about how he'd done all this for her. Padmé's response was sharp. When exactly did I ask you to go kill a bunch of younglings? The normal thing to do after having a bad dream is to forget about it, not destroy the society you live in, and kill a bunch of people. Her voice cooled to ice. I might be safer with you away from me, Anakin. Griff you, Padmé, Anakin said. Griff you too, Anakin, she replied with remarkable calm. Let's just not talk right now. We'll say things we'll regret. They sat in the cockpit, the swirling vortex of hyperspace their only companion. In the rear compartment, C-3PO's prissy voice carried through the ship's corridors. I must say, R2, I don't understand what Mistress Padmé meant about my walking. Is there something peculiar about my gait? R2-D2's response was a series of beeps that roughly translated to, you walk like a droid with a stick up its exhaust port. Well, C-3PO drew himself up with affronted dignity. At least I don't resemble a waste disposal unit with supplementary mobility apparatus. The Maxillipede shuttle touched down on the landing platform atop Padmé's apartment building. Thanks to its occupants' credentials, the Separatist vessel faced no resistance in Coruscant's increasingly militarized airspace. R2-D2 rolled down the ramp first, followed by C-3PO, who was verbally processing his attempts to modify his walking algorithms. If I just recalibrate the servo actuators in my hip joints by 0.03 degrees, perhaps my locomotion will appear less... What did you call it, R2? Ah yes, like I'm permanently stuck at a formal dinner party. Padmé and Anakin emerged last, still not speaking. Their eyes met briefly, and in a moment of shared understanding, they reached for each other, her hand on his arm, his on hers. They held that connection for a heartbeat before breaking apart. They'd be fine. They both knew it, despite the curses and yelling. R2 whistled something that made Padmé finally let go, walking away with C-3PO, while Anakin departed with R2. The droids they'd exchanged so long ago, now they're constant companions. The security detail simply nodded as they passed. If they'd been hesitant to ask questions before, now they were definitively more so. Days passed with minimal conversation between them, but eventually, as they both knew they would, they found their way back to each other. Their discussions turned to strategy, to the future. Anakin followed her advice, staying close to Palpatine, building his own power base. His first approach to the Emperor was predictably about saving Padmé from death. Palpatine made grand promises about solutions in the ancient archives, but when Luke and Leia were born healthy and Padmé emerged perfectly fine, the look she gave him spoke volumes about prophetic visions and hasty decisions. That moment marked a turning point. Anakin realized Palpatine's manipulation, but showed nothing of it. Instead, he used the archives to grow stronger, while maneuvering Padmé onto the Emperor's ruling council. Following her political guidance, he crafted his public image carefully until Emperor Skywalker became a common topic on the HoloNet, discussed as much as Palpatine himself. Palpatine had his own schemes, of course, but they came to nothing. During a diplomatic mission to Naboo, Anakin struck. The official story blamed rogue Jedi, and by the time Luke and Leia were 5 years old, Anakin ascended to the Imperial throne. The ruling council, now filled with his and Padmé's allies, promptly executed those of Palpatine's supporters who had arranged the Jedi attack. The remnants of both the rebellion and the surviving Jedi posed a different challenge, but Padmé's strategy proved masterful. Instead of crushing the rebellion with force, she suggested giving them what they seemed to want, a voice. The ruling council granted them seats and positions, trumpeting this inclusivity across the HoloNet. While underlying problems remained, careful propaganda ensured they were blamed on other factors, not the Empire. Ruling through strategy rather than fear prevented the rebellion from ever truly forming, with extreme elements like Saw Gerrera quickly losing support before meeting their end. For the surviving Jedi, Anakin's first act as Emperor was to call off the hunt. He established a new division of the military for Force users, headquartered in the former Jedi Temple. As its head and the Empire's ruler, he reformed the Jedi Order into something closer to his vision. Many acclaimed him as the true chosen one, and Ahsoka, still trusting in her former master despite everything, became one of his strongest supporters in building this new order. The reformed Jedi grew steadily under their combined leadership. Years passed, and the Empire found its rhythm. Padmé and her political allies increasingly handled day-to-day governance as Anakin, bored with endless meetings and bureaucracy, focused on his Force user division. Their relationship remained strong, though their children, that was more complicated. Luke and Leia grew up understanding exactly who they were, the children of the two most powerful people in the galaxy, with nearly infinite wealth at their disposal. Raised primarily on Naboo by Padmé's former handmaiden Dorme, they saw their parents sporadically. Anakin found what time he could to teach them the Force, often delegating to Ahsoka, who took on the role of mentor to her master's children, despite her misgivings about their privileged attitude. The twins inherited their father's Force sensitivity and their mother's sharp mind, but they also developed the entitled attitude of those who know they're untouchable. Their parents' absence, Anakin consumed by his new order, Padmé by the Empire's political machinery, left its mark. The twins' story remains its own mystery, a tale of privilege, power, and the complex legacy of being born to those who reshaped the galaxy. Peace reigned after a fashion. Not the peace of the Republic, perhaps, but a peace built on strategy rather than fear, on political acumen rather than pure force. A peace that proved, in the end, that Padmé had been right. The way to change the galaxy wasn't through sudden violence, but through patient, methodical control. Meanwhile, Master Yoda had gone to Dagobah, died there, and became a Force ghost. He also killed some Tuskens, but gave them the chance to live if they begged for their lives, in basic.